Hello and welcome back to ShimmerBlock, a Terraria Skyblock which has now been released as a map on the Steam Workshop. You can find a link in the description below if you want to play. In the last episode we went from this small island with nothing but Shimmer and some unbreakable obsidian, all the way to fighting Skeletron himself. If you haven't seen that, then click on the card on screen now to catch up on the progress so far. Otherwise, let's get straight into the Skeletron fight. Once again, the Star Fury comes in clutch and does really good damage against the boss, especially when combined with the Magma Stone for some additional damage over time. I did miss having a dash to be able to dodge the skulls, as I'd usually have the Shield of Cthulhu by now, but still come out on top regardless. With Skeletron defeated, the Dryad can now spawn. So after building another basic prison house for her to move into, I begin construction of my first proper build in this playthrough. With this build I wanted to give the illusion that it was floating to the left, with these trailing pieces of cloud breaking off behind it. Let me know in the comments if you think it worked. Once the build is complete, I get a message saying the Dryad has moved in. So I buy some grass seeds and acorns and begin planting them on the long strips of dirt I have. This will finally allow me to farm trees and gem trees as another source of wood, stone and gems, which is vastly superior to the older methods of killing myself and magically transmuting sentient creatures into lumps of rock. That night, while fishing, I get a notification warning me of the arrival of the Eye of Cthulhu. Luckily the Star Fury also does really well against this boss, and when combined with the long strips of blocks I have across the world, I managed to defeat the boss in no time while taking minimal damage. After the fight, I'd even realised that I forgot to change out my fishing armour. This is the only time I'll be able to fight the Eye of Cthulhu in this world, as I don't have an altar to craft summons. I'll need to be careful not to lose this Shield of Cthulhu, as the only other dash I have access to is from the armour dropped by Queen Slime. The Eye also dropped corrupt seeds, saving me from having to wait for a blood moon to buy these from the Dryad. I lay down some dirt and plant the seeds, then leave them to grow. A couple nights later, a blood moon spawns anyway, so I stock up on corrupt seeds and vile powder from the Dryad. Then try to do some blood moon fishing, which goes really well. In the morning, I used the corrupt seeds I'd bought to make a patch of corrupt mud, then used purification powder to convert this into jungle grass, unlocking a new biome and all the upgrades that come with it. Fishing in the jungle gives me access to many new items, such as the feral claws, anklet of the wind and boomstick, which means the arms dealer can finally move in. At this point I was getting concerned about how many NPCs were still in prison type houses though, so I got to work on building an artificial desert island. I didn't really have a plan going into this build, I was really just going with the flow. It takes a lot of sand to make an actual desert biome, so it was going to have to be much bigger than the project that I did in the forest. By the time I'd finished the build, I didn't have enough blocks to make it a desert, so I had to add these sandstone decorations around the island, which I think make it look better anyway. That's enough building for now though, it's time to get back into the action. By shimmering lava into honey and placing this on top of water, I can get the honey blocks needed to make an abomination, the summon for Queen Bee. Before I fight her though, I make use of my new desert to get a discount on the mini shark. This shreds through Queen Bee right up until the end of the fight, where her increased defense means I'm only dealing 1 or 2 damage per shot. Eventually, however, she falls, and I use the beeswax she drops to replace my slime staff with a hornet one, then resummon the Queen Bee. I was wanting to get some bee armour, as being able to attack enemies without player input is pretty useful in any skyblock, with all the enemy farming that's required. After another 2 kills I have enough to craft the set, and also buy a pygmy necklace from the witch doctor for the extra minion slot it gives. I did place more mud down in the hopes of being able to get jungle spores for the snapthorn, but they didn't end up spawning quickly enough to make it worth it. The next major project was laying out a safety net along the bottom of the world using planter boxes. This is so that if I die, I don't have to worry about my items falling out of the world. Once this was done, I tried using it as a wall of flesh bridge. However, the hitboxes of the eyes ended up being way too high to hit with most of my weapons. I placed a platform high enough that it could target the eye, but not so high that I would struggle with dodging. The first attempt with the new bridge was painfully close, so after respawning and collecting my items, I decided to go for a magic based setup using the demon scythe for damage. It was great at tearing through the hungries and dealing damage to the wall itself. Before long, the wall of flesh was defeated, plunging my world into hard mode. With hard mode unlocked, there's a lot of work to be done. First of all was killing spiders at my artificial spider nest biome. I learned in my Sentries Only challenge that the Queen Spider Staff is a very powerful support weapon for farming mobs. If you haven't seen that video, then I'd recommend it. It's one of my favourite challenges I've done. Whenever it rained, I would take advantage of the increased fishing power to gather some crates. Now that I'm in hard mode, I'm able to get hard mode ores from these, which I can later use to make better armour. If I was going to take down any hard mode bosses, I was going to need better mobility, so I farm a bunch of pixies in the Hallowed, and then afterwards some wyverns in space. I then combine their drops to make fairy wings, one of the best options I have available for now. After another fishing session, I was almost ready to upgrade to a full set of orichalcum armour, but not before dying to a nearly invisible wraith. Even when dying this close to spawn, it still cost me almost 5 minutes just to pick up and organise all my items. I really wish there was some sort of death storage system for Mediumcore, where you could easily transfer your items into the same slots as before, similar to many gravestone mods for Minecraft. Another thing is that if I leave the world after dying, all of my items are deleted, so it's just not a good time. Not long after, I make the final piece of armour, opting for the mage headgear as most of the weapons I'd obtained happened to be magic ones. Knowing that hell would become a lot more deadly after defeating a mechanical boss, I decided to farm the wall of flesh now. While I could shimmer my emblem into any of the other 4 options, it was good to have extras as they'd be used for crafting upgrades further down the line. With all the gold he was going to steal from me in this playthrough, it was finally time to give the Goblin Tinkerer a permanent home in the caverns, but only for the discounted reforges. I wanted each build to be somewhat unique in this playthrough, but still be believably floating in mid-air. For the caverns, I decided to go for some kind of magical geode planet thing propping up houses. I've been playing Minecraft with some friends recently, so I guess the amethyst geodes would maybe inspired it a bit. I'd also bought a lot of Destiny wood and shingles in pre-hard mode, so a lot of the builds will use those blocks out of pure convenience. After some finishing touches, I moved the goblin in and began construction of some underground corrupt and hallowed biomes for Souls of Night and Light. For the corrupt one, I made a fishing pool so I could get the ebon koi required for wrath potions, and for the hallowed one, I set it up in a way that would help me farm gelatin crystals to summon Queen Slime. With access to Souls of Night and Light, I was able to safely fight biomimics on the surface, giving me much more powerful potions and weapons with which to fight the upcoming bosses. Speaking of bosses, let's get right into a Queen Slime fight. As always, the minions are more dangerous than Queen Slime herself, especially with the extra health they have in Master Mode. Admittedly, the Crystal Serpent probably wasn't the best option to use, but it did the job. In Phase 2 I mostly relied on the Unicorn mount to outrun Queen Slime, which worked perfectly until I ran into my desert biome, being forced to turn around and face all her minions. Luckily, I managed to weave my way through them and come out on top. I did try to fight her again to get the mount, but unfortunately I died. Thinking I might die a little less with a melee build, I decided to take down the hard mode goblin army, as the Shadow Flame knife is one of the best options available at this point. With the Crystal Vial Shard being able to attack through blocks, the only real threat is goblin warlocks, which get pretty close to taking me out a couple of times. Thankfully though, I survived, and was even lucky enough to get the Shadow Flame knife on my first attempt. After a long time fishing for crates and materials for potions, I remembered I could buy a bewitching table from the witch doctor, then shimmer it into an alchemy table for cheaper potions. This is one of the only dungeon items that's available in this map due to the complete lack of a dungeon. After crafting some potions, I decided to take down the Frost Legion. I was lucky I did this playthrough around Christmas, as this is the only way to get snow blocks in the world pre-Moonlord. The snowmen hit surprisingly hard, so I stayed hidden behind blocks for most of the fight. I then gathered the snow that was dropped and placed, but had no plans to make a snow biome anytime soon. I had other plans tonight, as it was finally time to take on the first of the mechanical bosses, the twins.